Otsuki Spinoff. Otsuki Spinoff is referring to the spin-off based off of Taro Otsuki, one of the villains from the second part of Kaiji that has been released in the past few years. Also, something interesting about the Otsuki spin-off is that it somehow has managed to have 18 volumes. I know Fukumoto is allowed, and I know Fukumoto is technically allowed to write what he wants, but I just don't know how he finds that much content for Otsuki. On top of that, it's still ongoing. I don't know if it's any good, but I guess I'll have to read it one day to find out. For anyone who has read the whole thing, I would be thankful if you put it in the comments what your thoughts are of it. Ichijo Spinoff. Once again, this is a spin-off of Kaiji, and once again, it's of an antagonist, and once again, they're from the second part. Compared to the Otsuki spin-off, which had 18 volumes, from what I could find, the Ichijo spin-off only has 6, which seems much more reasonable, but still, I wonder how you found that much content for it. Though, if any of you have read the entire thing, it would be much appreciated if you, again, put your thoughts in the comments. Kaiji Parts adapted in Pachinko. It's likely that you've already seen them, but there have been a few parts of Kaiji that have been adapted inside of Pachinko games, at least partly, not the entire thing. If there's one that you're most likely to have seen, then that would be the 17 Steps Pachinko game, as shown here.
必要なんです。カイジさんのその力が。実は俺たちの雇い主、カジノの社長。少年の腐った意地悪な実にひどいやつでして、ぜひやっつけてほしいんです。お願いします。お願いします。お願いします。お願いします。
As I said before, that is not the only pachinko machine that has been made of Kaiji. There's been one made of Part 4, adapting a bit of that. There's also been one made of resembling the Bog from Part 2, and from what I can see, it also seems to adapt a bit of it, or at least show a bit from the anime. So, if you're ever able to get your hands on that, all I can say is that I hope you have a lot of water. Oshiki Ekyuden, or in English, Fukumoto All Stars. Fukumoto All Stars was a manga serialized for about 3 years, and it was written and illustrated by Chihomaru. However, it was supervised by Fukumoto. As you can see, it has a chibi art style, and, at first I was thinking, oh, is this illustrated by Fukumoto? But as I said, it was illustrated by Chihomaru. Though it would have been funny if, you just saw Fukumoto's art style go from this to this. But I suppose it makes sense to have people with different art styles work on different things. Fukumoto All Stars is a crossover between several different of Fukumoto's franchises, most notably being Kaiji and Akagi, of course, and it has a total of 3 volumes, and as I said, it's serialized for 3 years, so it's now over. Tonagawa spin-off, Inconsistent Timeline. This entry is referring to Tonagawa Middle Management Blues from the first layer, and it is because in Middle Management Blues, there are several cases where characters are using things that would be created decades after the time period which Kaiji is set in about the late 90s, whereas there are pictures showing them using stuff such as smartphones in the Tonagawa spin-off. But it doesn't end with just the Tonagawa spin-off. Ree Seinen spent some time looking through the Ichijo spin-off, and from what he could find, it seemed to take place in an alternate universe. If I had to give an answer for the most likely reason that Fukumoto put these things into spin-offs, it would be that, they're comedy series, and they probably aren't canon. At least, assume so. So, that's what I would assume, anyways. Endo's Bouquet of Flowers. This entry is referring to a part of the first part of Kaiji, where Endo greets Kaiji with a bouquet of flowers in order to convince him to join the human derby. However, that alone probably wouldn't be noticeable enough to be on the iceberg. The real reason it's on here is because, for whatever reason, they decided to cut this scene out of the anime. Kaiji composer arrested. This entry is referring to the arrest of Hideki Taniyuchi, who is the composer, or at least the main composer for Kaiji. And before any of you worry, it wasn't for anything like what Watsuki did. It was for the possession of drugs, specifically marijuana, which is illegal in Japan. He was arrested in 2012, and from sources I've seen, it seems that he has spent a decade in prison, and he may have gotten out, though I'm not quite sure about that, though if he was released since he was arrested in 2012, he would have been released in likely 2022. Also, here's just a quick little fun fact about him. He worked on several other animes such as Aoi Bungaku, Akagi, and most notably Death Note. So you may have heard his music in those animes, and hopefully he returns to the industry someday, but from what I've heard, it seems unlikely. I've even seen some things saying that his arrest might be the reason why Kaiji hasn't had a third season, which I hope not, but it wouldn't be too surprising. So let's just hope he gets out someday and continues making that music, because it's pretty good. I'm guessing most of you noticed, but for anyone who hasn't, his music has actually been playing in the background of this video, so I'll start another track here. Animal World. This entry is referring to the movie Animal World, released in 2018, which was based off of Kaiji. And it's not like it was a ripoff, as it does state Nobuyuki Fukumoto to be the original writer. Not the writer of it, but I guess they're at least crediting him for Kaiji, so I mean, it does differentiate from the manga a bit. I'm not sure why they made it because of the movie trilogy. Maybe it's just because it's a different audience, in China. But hey, there's another movie. Kaiji's been marked. Even though it reads as marked, what it's really referring to is the part of part 1 where Kaiji gets branded after he loses in the Espor. And then he goes back. And the main reason why it's on the list is because, like the Bouquet, it was cut from the anime. I'm not exactly sure why, but nonetheless, it was cut. Asahi Kaiji campaign. The beer company Asahi had a campaign in 2018 with Kaiji. The reason why is because in part 2, Kaiji can actually be seen drinking Asahi brand beer when he's in the mine. I've heard a lot in movies about how brands pay the movie makers a certain amount, then they try to fit in their brand somewhere in the movie. Like, one example I think was in one of the Transformer movies, they had Bud Light in just one scene. I'll show it here.
It's your car? Huh? Sweetie, hand me my alien gun.
So I was trying to find if he had actually partnered with them beforehand, and that's why he put Asahi into the manga. Or Asahi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But from what I could find, the partnership the campaign started in 2018. So it doesn't have anything to do with sponsorship or something like that. Kaiji inspired Squid Game. The writer of Squid Game stated this in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, where he said, "I was broke, so I spent a lot of time, killing time, in comic book cafes, reading, and I read a lot of comic books revolving around surviving death games. Manga like Liar Game, Kaiji, and Battle Royale. And, well, I read some stories about these indebted people entering into these life and death games. And that became really immersive for me, because I was struggling financially myself, and I was even thinking that I would love to join a game like that if it existed, to make a bunch of cash and get out of this terrible situation. Then that got me thinking, well, I'm a director. Why don't I just make a movie with this kind of storyline? So that's how it all got started. I decided that I wanted to create a Korean survival game piece in my own way. That's how Squid Game was initially conceived in 2008. And with that concludes the second layer of the Kaiji Iceberg.